I'm Rachel. I work in Greenbelt's development department, and we started last year with these member-only events. Obviously this year is a little different. This was supposed to be our first members-only event with our invasive plant walk on Cox Reservation. So we're going to do the best we can today and take you through it virtually. But we're standing here today at beautiful Cox Reservation in Essex. This is Greenbelt's headquarters. Just stunning scenery, so if you can't get here yourself, please enjoy it here today. Definitely before we start everything, I just want to give a big thank you to our members. Membership for Greenbelt is so important to us at any time, now more than ever, and I just want to welcome you to this event, whether you've been a member with us for a few years or some I know have been with us for many, many years. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. We're really excited to share this beautiful place with you. But I want to get right to the fun stuff and why you're here, and I'm going to turn things over to Dave McKinnon, who is a land manager here at Greenbelt, and he's going to help take us through this walk. So thank you.
Hello everyone. Like Rachel said, welcome to the Cox Reservation. Today we are going to talk about invasive plants. First off, my name is Dave McKinnon. I work in the stewardship department as a land manager and trails coordinator. I've been working with and around invasive plants for the past 15 years or so. So I've got to know them well. This walk does come with a disclaimer though. Once you learn about invasive plants, you might not see the landscape the same way you saw it before. You cannot get mad at me if all of a sudden you realize that everything you see are invasive plants. And sometimes I've had some of my trails assistants with me at the end of the season pretty much cuss me out saying that, why did you teach me about invasive plants? So if you don't want your perspective on what is out in nature to change, then this might not be the lecture for you. So to start off, what are invasive plants? So invasive plants are non-native plants that have come from a different country, typically from Asia or from Europe. They've come over for a number of different reasons. Some plants have come over in ballasts of ships. Some plants have come over purposefully for cultivation for different reasons. And some have come over just because they were attached to some other animal or another species and dropped off in this area. So why are they invasive? Invasive plants are plants that create a monoculture. So you have some plants like our native poison ivy or our native grapevines. These plants, while they do dominate a landscape, they are not creating the lack of biodiversity that invasive plants tend to create. Invasive plants outcompete our native plants. They put out their leaves first, they keep their leaves later into the season, and so that is one of the reasons how and why they outcompete our native plants. So what we're going to do today, we'll take a look at a few of the species we have growing here at Cox. This is meant to be sort of a primer on invasive plants, so we're not going to get a deep dive into each species and their taxonomy and all that, but I just want to show what plants we have here, why they're growing here, and what they are doing. Okay, so we're going to take a look over here first. We have the king of the invasive plants in our area, which is the Oriental Bittersweet. This plant here is a vine, tends to grow up other invasive plants. It'll grow up trees. It is a very, very competitive species. This species seed rate germinates at 95%, which means that its seeds are very viable in the soil. They can be viable for 10 years or more. This plant came over primarily as an erosion control. It's got a very strong root system. It was planted a lot on our highways to control roadside erosion. And the problem with it is that the berries are very desirable for certain bird species. So the birds will come, they'll eat it, they'll spread it. And so they'll take one plant and just spread it to a different area. That's its main dissemination. We have different ways that invasive plants will spread around. It could be windborne, they can be eaten by birds and dropped off. Their root systems can spread around. This plant primarily is spreading by its root system and by its seeds being dropped off by other birds and other species. The reason why I say it is the king of invasive plants, as you can see here, it's starting to dominate our other invasive plants growing here. As I mentioned before, invasive plants outcompete other plants by putting their leaves out before everything else. So as you can see around us, a lot of our native plants have yet to put their leaves out. And this is the Multiflora Rose. It's got a red berry. It's got a backwards shaped hooked barb to it, so it really can latch onto you pretty well. This plant was brought over for primarily for agricultural purposes as sort of a living fence. They would plant this around different cattle crops and things like that, so that it become almost like an impenetrable fence that the cattle cannot get through. This plant does climb as well, not nearly as high as the bittersweet. The bittersweet can climb a 70-foot tall tree. This one here will climb sort of the smaller stuff and dominate that way. So the other plant we have is just around the corner. We have our honeysuckle bush right here. This guy is easily identifiable this time of year. It's kind of one of the top invasive plants to get out and get to know this time of year. We'll see as we walk around the reservation, we have a lot of this growing, and it's really visible at this time of year. It's got this really lime green colored leaf to it. The bark is very shaggy in a way. You can almost peel some of the bark off. It's a brittle plant. See if I have my snippers on. What I can show you is that one way to tell between our native honeysuckle and our invasive honeysuckle is that the invasive one will have this hole in the middle, or kind of have a pithy center to it. Our native ones, which we actually have one growing next to the headquarters building, will be solid in the middle and have a bit of a different leaf structure to it. This plant was brought over, a lot of it was brought over for birds and for wildlife. Again, another one of the species that the birds will eat this berry and spread it all over as well, but it's a very opportunistic plant. Will take over a disturbed area pretty quickly. The root systems can be easy to dig up. That's another one of the ways you can control these plants, by ripping them up by the root systems. When you do that, you do stimulate the seed bank a bit, so you'll have a lot of new shoots coming up. But a lot of the times in invasive plant management, if you can take out what they call the mother plant, or the plant that's producing the most berries, at least you can get a sort of a head start or a jump start. Bittersweet takes about 3 years to develop a berry. So if you take out the berry bearing plants, you've gained about 3 years of pushing the seed bank back into the area where it's just not going to be as viable for about 3 years. So that's one way to manage them. These things are very challenging to manage, and so taking care of the mother plants and the seed bearing plants or berry bearing plants are the one way to at least try to manage them. You might not be able to fully control them, but at least you'll be able to stunt their growth at that period. We're going to take a little walk over here. I wanted to show again what I was talking about with the grapevine. So bittersweet, like we said, will grow up and take down trees, but our native grapevine will as well. We have a little bit over here. You'll see it's just not as dominant. It's not creating a monoculture. It's not taking over the area. And by taking down trees and by near field edges, it actually will start to generate, a new forest. So we're not too concerned about our native grapevine, and it's a nice edible as well. Another species we have over here is our European barberry. This one was actually planted in Thomas Jefferson Monticello garden. So, these plants have been around for a long time. It's been around since the 1700s. If you clip this one here, I'm just trying to show Rachel, but it has like a yellow center to it. So it's one way to identify it. It's got this sort of yellowy bark when you clip it. Be careful when you do handle it. It's got sort of 3 thorns at the base that will go right through your work glove. So barberries can be a tricky plant to try and manage just because handling them is very challenging. The berries on them are edible. You can make like a fruit leather out of them. One of the things they're finding with the Japanese version of the barberry is that it creates sort of a warmer understory to it, which allows rodents like the mice to have a longer breeding season. Mice are the vector for Lyme's disease, and so when the ticks get on these mice that have been living a lot longer under these warmer understories, they're finding that the diseases that the ticks carry are actually stronger, and so the barberries are one of the things that are leading to the spread more of the Lyme's disease and some of those other tick-borne diseases. The barberries is very typical here. You don't have much left because it's the spring. So you do have these little red berries. It's one way to identify the barberry. These were planted from the horticultural industry as well, so people have a lot of these in their gardens. They liked it because the berry came out really late in the season, so it gives your garden a little color later than most other plants would. This one can be controlled by mowing, pulling, and then there are some chemical options as well if you choose to try and control this plant. From that point, we're going to take a walk around the corner here, and we'll go and find our next invasive plants that are calling this place home. Okay, so at this site, we're going to talk about the invasive species called garlic mustard. Garlic mustard is a plant that was actually brought over by the colonists. It's an edible plant, and you can make pestos and things like that out of it. What the colonists did is another name they had, it was called sauce alone. So what they would do at a lot of the poor farmers, they would have their bread and they'd take garlic mustard and they'd put the garlic mustard in the bread to give it some flavor. So our early colonists would bring this over from Europe and plant it and cultivate it in their gardens. It grew really well, really fast. Invasive plants love disturbed soils, and so the point of showing you this one here is how this area here is a plowed spot that we plow every year, and this pile here is sort of what's left over from plowing this winter. And what we can see is that the garlic mustard here is already started to grow. I mean, this is mid-April, and you have a pretty healthy garlic mustard plant already taking hold here. Garlic mustard, one plant can produce about 600 seeds, so you can see how they proliferate very well. Another story behind the garlic mustard is sort of a philosophical question on how do you manage invasive plants. Like we said, this has been here since the early colonists, so when do you consider a plant naturalized? It's spread all over. Do you take a lot of time and resources to manage a plant like this? Or do you take more of your time and resources to manage plants that are called the early detection species? Things like kudzu, mile a minute, narrowleaf bittercrest. These are some of our early detection species. There's not a ton of them here, and so it's sometimes better to focus your attention on some of these early detection species. There's a theory that if you go out in the woods and you find one invasive plant in the middle of the forest, that's almost better than spending a whole day on your knees pulling garlic mustard by hand. There's also a study out of the Cornell University that says that by pulling garlic mustard, you actually restart an atrophic cycle that after about 10 years or so, the garlic mustard will start to poison itself off through the soil. And so by pulling it, you restart that cycle. So pulling it, this is very easy to pull. You can get success doing it. It takes a number of years. I've worked on some sites where it's taken about 5 to 7 years of pulling just to manage this species. But it is very tasty, and you can eat this one. So next start we'll do is we'll go down here and we'll talk about purple loosestrife and some of the other species that are growing down the road. All right, so again, we're talking about disturbed areas. This here is a roadway that was built a couple years ago, and what we can see is how opportunistic some of these invasive plants are. This is last year's purple loosestrife plant. As you can see, it's pretty much growing right out of the rock retaining structure here. I can't even see the bottom of the plant really, it's so buried in there, but it's growing out in just a very disturbed area. This is one of the plants that I mentioned. It came over in the ballast of ships primarily and is spread. It spreads primarily through rhizomes, but also the birds will eat this one and spread it. The primary concern about purple loosestrife is it is a wetland loving plant. So a lot of the plants we're talking about today are all terrestrial, primarily upland plants. This one here is a wetland specialist. It does take uplands, but the problem is when it goes into wetlands, it has such a knotty, entangled root system with fine hairs in it that can capture the silt. And so as the plant captures the silt that comes through the wetland, it will slowly actually fill the wetland in time and turn the wetland into something that it wasn't before. So, you know, invasive plants, again, they create this monoculture that disturbs our natural areas. And so this guy here in particular really is a problem in a lot of our wetlands. It's a very showy plant. It's got very beautiful purple flowers to it, and it has a boxy stem as well. So that is one way to determine purple loosestrife from some of the other plants, especially this time of year. Some of the goldenrods will still have a roundish stem to them. This guy here, if you feel him, you can kind of feel how he's got some rigid corners to him, and he's got a kind of a box-shaped stem. So this one is one of the ones that you can control this one by digging it up, but the main way this one's being controlled, and the key word is controlled, not eradicated. Eradicating invasive species is a very, very tricky, costly, and sometimes chemical-laden process. If we can weaken the plants and make them not outcompete our native ones by being weaker or not creating such a monoculture, then we can at least get a restart on our ecosystem. So this plant here is one of the ones that they use a biological control on, which is called the Garlicella beetle. This beetle is one that you can raise on last year's stalks. Well, what I mean by that is that if you take last year's root systems, you can plant that, and that root system, when it regrows in a pot, you can add the beetles to it. You net the plant off, let the beetles do their thing on the plant. You can turn 10 beetles into about 500 beetles. And then you release those beetles into a wetland. They will only stay on the purple loosestrife. They've been tested for years to make sure they only stay on one plant, and they will weaken that species throughout the wetland. Really, that's the only way we can hope to weaken this plant, at least, is by the biological control, especially since it's in a wetland. You're not going to be wanting to put any sort of chemicals on it. Since we're here at a wetland, the next species we can talk about is kind of off in the distance over there, but that is the Phragmites. This species here is very similar to the purple loosestrife, where the roots and the bottom network of these plants capture the sediments, and over time will fill in a wetland, so it's no longer a wetland anymore. You'll find the Phragmites all throughout the salt marsh and the great marsh. You can control it if you can mow it and spray it, the new shoots, with a natural herbicide. You can control it that way. There have been a lot of herbicide applications to control this one, but it's got a very skinny stem. It's hard to see from here, but it's really hard to apply a chemical to that. And again, you're in a wetland, so it's not really the best place to be working with chemicals. But again, the philosophical side of these plants, what they're starting to maybe think about now with ocean level rise, sea rise, is that maybe these Phragmites plants will actually protect us and provide storm surge protection. So it's another way to sort of look at these plants and kind of rethink, you know, are the invasive plants now naturalized? Are they helping us out, or are they ruining our ecosystem? So like I said, I'm not going to do much more of a deeper dive into that, but those are the plants here. And I'll take a quick walk over here and take a look at these guys. Okay, so some of the plants we're looking at here are ones we've already covered, but it just kind of gives us a little bit of a different perspective. So behind me here we have Multiflora Rose, we have the Honeysuckle, and we have the Bittersweet. I'm about 5'9", and you can see about how tall the Multiflora Rose and the Honeysuckle can get. These plants can get pretty significantly in size. This also shows sort of how the Bittersweet wraps itself around itself. So it started out as a little tender green shoot, almost sort of this size. Bittersweet will start to wrap itself, and then eventually will get to be the size of almost my thigh. Some of the bigger ones you'll see on the highways, they can be massive, and that's when they really can cause the most damage and taking down some of our larger trees. I talked about mechanical removal, which is ripping trees or invasive plants out by their root systems. When you think about that task, and then you look at a species of honeysuckle like this guy here, taking this guy out by the root system would be, you'd have to have a pretty large piece of equipment. You'd have a lot of soil disruption here. So sometimes a better approach with something like this, maybe to cut and dab some chemicals on the cut portion of this plant to get the chemicals into the root system and kill it off that way. But you know, a plant this size, it's a lot of biomass, it's a huge root system. Pulling this out, you're going to need like an excavator or a front end loader to get this out. A tractor that the size of the Greenbelt has really wouldn't be able to pull something like this out. So just to give you some perspective on what these plants can get to in size. Alrighty, so we're at our second to last stop here. We're going to be talking about a plant that is called black swallow-wort. There are two swallow-worts, there's pale and black swallow-wort. Both are invasive, both are not great for the same reason. So what we have growing here is the black swallow-wort. It's a vine. I'll clip it out so you can see it a little better. This vine here is a seed-borne, wind-borne seed plant. So this is the seed pod from last year. It's almost like milkweed, where it spreads, by the wind. It looks a lot like milkweed, and to the monarch butterfly, they think it is milkweed. And that's a big problem with black swallow-wort. The monarch butterflies will lay their eggs in here, but this seed pod can't support the larval life for long enough for it to grow, and it'll die off. So this is really a dearth for the monarch butterfly. Black swallow-wort has a purple flower to it. It's a little small purple flower. It'll come out in about July, into June, July. And it again is like bittersweet, where it's a little tender vine and then starts to wrap around itself and gets stronger that way and can climb up the trees. This one creates a pretty big monoculture. It's very hard to control mechanically, pulling this up by the root system. It's like has a spaghetti strand sort of root system to it. So trying to get each root out so that root doesn't re-sprout is nearly impossible. I've been at organic farms where we've tried to manage it in this spot. Before I got there, it was about 10 years they were trying to manage this plant, and they just couldn't control it through mowing and trying to hand pull it. They've tried to tarp it. This is the one species where I feel comfortable using an herbicide on it. And unfortunately, it's the spray version of the herbicide that I will try to use, because when you do a paint stem application like the big honeysuckle we showed back there, you can cut it and you have a lot of surface to paint your herbicide on. This one here is such a tiny little stem, you can't get enough herbicide on this to effectively transport the herbicide down to the root system. So a lot of the times I will try to either cut this one so it grows low and spray it, or be very careful. This is one spot, you can kind of see it's browned out from where I sprayed it last year. And so we're hoping that this will not come back this following year. We got it pretty good. So a black swallow-wort, like I said, wind-borne seed plant. So this one can really spread. The spot I was talking about, the organic farm, was next to the train line. And so the trains would just catch this and just whip it down the train line and spread it pretty fast. The other species I wanted to talk about again was the garlic mustard, just to show you. Garlic mustard is a biannual plant, so it has two stage growths during 2-year cycle. The first year cycle is actually the seedling cycle, which are these little tiny seedlings down here. So this is the first year of the garlic mustard. This is actually a good time to try to control it while it's all over the understory here. This is one that you can use what's called a flame weeder on. It's pretty much a propane tank blowtorch, and when it's raining out, it's a good time to come out with an item like that, and you can get a blowtorch all of these seedlings and really pretty quickly manage this population. In a spot like this, I wouldn't tend to blowtorch because of all the dead wood around here, but it really is a great way to try to control these seedlings here. So what I wanted to show you here is kind of what I used to call the wall of green. So when I was first learning my plants and what different species were, and I was looking at a shrub line, it just looked like one tone of green to me, and it was hard to identify what plant was what from a distance without having to go up and really look at the plant. One thing that really helped me kind of break through that wall of green, we're learning about invasive plants, and especially at this time of year where nothing else really is growing and putting out leaves. So behind me we have the wall of honeysuckle that we have growing here. You can see how it's already put its leaves out amongst everything else that's here. The only thing green behind me is honeysuckle. So when you come out at this time of year, you can start to see this lime green, and it'll really start to let you disseminate between what's native and what's not. And like we said, some of our native plants act like they're invasive plants, like this sumac that I have in my hand. People always ask me, is sumac invasive? Because it spreads into their lawns from the hedgerows, and all it's doing is its job. It's a root system, root sucker tree, so it's going to grow from its rhizomes. It's going to come out into fields, but it's not going to create that monoculture. So as you can see behind me, we have some sumac growing in, but amongst this is pretty much all honeysuckle. So we'll do a quick little walk over here. and we'll just show you a couple of the plants that we talked about today. We have this guy here, which is our bittersweet vine. You can see how I was talking about it. It starts out with this little tender, little tiny little stalk here, and it turns into something this thick, and eventually it will just get much bigger than that. Orange berry, roadside control is why that one was planted. We have the purple loosestrife plant here. So like I said, the boxy stem, purple flowers on it, grows in wetlands. You can see it's actually a pretty tall plant as well too. It gets pretty high out in the wetland. The honeysuckle, like I said, it's already got the leaves on it. It gets like a red berry on it as well. We have the Phragmites here, so you got the nice, kind of telltale stalk to it. This one here kind of grows in knuckles. A lot of times what they do with the herbicides is, since it's hollow inside, I get a good cut on it. Since it's hollow, you can take a nozzle, and once you snip it, you put a nozzle in there, and you actually can drip it down into the stem and fill up these nodes. And so like you sort of fill up one little section there with the herbicide. But as you can see, this patch we showed you down there, doing that one at a time is just painstakingly boring. We have the Multiflora Rose, red berry, backward shaped hook on the thorn. Can climb as well. And then the garlic mustard here. And you can almost see, you kind of see it's starting to form its flower already. So not only is this one leaved out, but it's already putting a flower out. So you can see how these guys just really well compete our natives. Great, well thank you guys for attending this walk virtually with me. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have about invasive plants. Feel free to reach out to me through the Greenbelt's website. There are plenty of places online to learn about invasive plants. EdMaps is a great one to go and check out. They have places where you can actually report invasive plants and see where other plants in your area have been reported. And there are plenty of other places online as well to check out to learn about these plants, but please feel free if you have any questions to let me know. And thanks again for attending this virtual walk. Be well, and we'll see you soon.